Welcome back to Frame by Frame. January turned out to be full of surprises, great films ranging from Ferrari to Society of Snow. But here we're talking about the releases for February. So let's jump right into that as we have a lot to talk about. We've got a lot of variety, including new releases, live theatre, and even a re-release of a beloved modern classic, which is the film that I'm going to be talking about, Les Miserables from 2012. So this is directed by Tom Hooper of The King's Speech, won Best Picture for The King's Speech. Features an all-star cast. So just to name a few, we have Hugh Jackman, Russell Crowe, Anne Hathaway, Amanda Seyfried, Eddie Redmayne, Helena Bonham Carter, and Sacha Baron Cohen. And that's not even everyone. Those are just kind of the top people you probably might know. But this is just to kind of give you a rundown of kind of what's happening here because it's not all every day that we kind of get a re-release of a film, especially as recently as 2012. But this is to celebrate the 40th anniversary of the classic stage musical. It's the longest running West End musical ever. And so, before this film was even released, it had a very big kind of hype towards it. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of fans of the original musical who are going to want to come out and see this. But for those who aren't really big fans of the original musical, kind of to give you a basic kind of idea of the plot. So it's sort of set in 19th century France, and it follows this man called Jean Valjean. After he's released from prison, he was arrested for stealing bread to feed his sister's family. After being released, he eventually breaks parole to start life anew, completely disassociated from his previous sort of ways of crime and this and that, and he takes on the responsibility of looking after the daughter of a dying, impoverished woman he meets called Fantine, played by Anne Hathaway, who won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress. However, he's pursued by Inspector Javert, who's played by Russell Crowe, who remembers and recognizes him as the criminal he once was and makes it his life mission to sort of capture him. And meanwhile, in the background of all this, there's the French Revolutionary War going on, and a lot of our characters kind of end up entangled in it. There are kind of romantic love triangles and a lot more than the kind of basic plot I just described going on.
You said all of this, and you said all the stats about it being on stage, and it's actually embarrassing that I've never actually seen this on stage or the film or anything. And so that description was just like, wow, I never actually knew any of that. So thank you.
It's all right. I mean, I'm personally a very big fan of this musical, both this film and itself as a musical. I've I've gone to the West End. I've seen it multiple times, and I've watching this film growing up. I've definitely seen it in double digits. I don't know why. Like our family just loved it. We would always listen to the soundtrack in the car. And this film, obviously, it's kind of the easiest way to access that experience of going to that musical. So if you are a fan of the original musical, the West End musical, and you've never seen this is a perfect opportunity to go out and see it because I think it is a pretty good representation. Obviously there's always the argument that, can it ever really emulate exactly what it's doing on stage? But I think it's a pretty good representation, which you don't always get when they adapt the stage musicals into movie musicals. And also you kind of get the benefit, maybe if you didn't catch it the first time, this is now on the big screen. And this is a film that I think personally does actually benefit from that because this music is a musical of really big scale. So you have these scenes, like I said about the French Revolutionary War. It's, you know, them marching and singing these big crowds, and
Mm.
they're able to enhance stuff with CGI and create a France, of back in that century that is you're limited with on stage. And so this is one of the things that actually benefits from being on a cinema screen, especially being on the big screen like this. Yeah, I would say it's worth it for that in itself. Beyond that, beyond just the spectacle of it, I think it's actually just a really good film.
Mm.
And the music in it is brilliant, and it's aided by the fact in this case that you have live singing. So everything you hear on screen is actually the live recorded performances of the actors. There's no dubbing over, which makes it feel very, very embodied and a lot more, despite the, they're very kind of sentimental, very grand musical numbers. It helps, a sense of like physical intimacy and groundedness to the story because the story is very grounded. You're dealing with an ill-stricken prostitute has to give her daughter away. It also has this very intimate kind of feel. It's not your standard movie musical. It's not something like Singing in the Rain where it's you know, literally all singing and dancing.
Mm.
In this you have shots of people, just on the streets starving, and you have this really intimate work with the camera. It's like there's a lot of handheld stuff down on the streets with these people. So it's quite interesting in that respect that it has this grittiness to it. So again, if even if you're not a fan of the kind of lovey-dovey crazy musical, this is maybe something new to go with.
Would you say that it's a film that if you're studying film or anything to do with the kind of the media, it's one to definitely see because as you said, like with the singing live and the way that it's filmed, it sounds like one that it's again, I should have watched it while I was studying my A levels. But yeah, do you think it's one that kind of anyone interested in film and any students as well that need to see it?
Yeah, I mean, I think potentially, I think especially if you're interested in the musical genre and the way that's
Yeah,
evolved
okay, yeah.
over time, I think is especially interesting because it does set itself apart from that. And I think that's why it's such a, it's kind of a modern classic in a way. And the reason why we want to bring it back is because it is a bit of a shift in the musical genre. So I think the people who are kind of fans of the history of that genre, I think there is something to see here. Saying that though, I think you're more likely to want to watch it if you're a fan of the original musical, because even though I think the musical's great, and I think this is actually it is a very good entry point if you've never been able to see it, the show. I think it is a very good entry point. Some people do, though, for whatever reason, they just can't get over the sort of sentimentality of the music, and they can, find it quite exhausting, especially this grittiness that it has to it. On the other side, there's a lot of handheld camera that they're moving about, and it can become quite disorientating, and and it is this gritty kind of story, so it is very kind of miserable, and so some people can find it quite like almost sickeningly kind of overly sentimental, and at the same time kind of just misery after misery. So and kind of visually disorientating, because if one of my criticisms of the film probably would be that there is a bit too much camera movement. You do get kind of random topsy-turvy camera for kind of no reason. Not to say that the rest of it isn't staged well, because the musical numbers are really staged well, but if that's something you are kind of concerned about, the film, especially its length, is close to 3 hours, can be draining for some people. But honestly, every time I watch it, I can get through it so easily just because the music, every song is just great. And it's actually sung the whole way through as well. So that's another interesting point.
I think a lot about kind of how important it is to kind of re-release these old classics because of how vital it is to give audiences a chance to see films on the big screen either like again or for the first time if they haven't had the chance to.
There's something different about seeing, there are these scenes which are predicated on this barricade that the revolutionaries that hide themselves behind. And there's this big conflict, and seeing the scale of that barricade that, that's towering over them, that they've built for themselves. There's something about seeing that, I think, on the big screen. And musicals always lend themselves to it, because just hearing that the music, especially as great as it is in this film, it's always worth it. Getting to see it on that Dolby sound system.
I was going to say from like a technical side of things, like it's not like seeing sitting in a cinema with the actual it's like it's been mixed for this speaker and this sound system. Whereas you're sat at home, yes, you can have sound bars and surround sound and everything, but I just have a TV and like speakers
Mm.
at the back. Like it's not designed to give the full impact. So I think like yeah, from technical side, especially for musicals, I think
Yeah.
it's a great opportunity to see it in that atmosphere.
Especially for musicals on the big screen, I think it feels like a celebration of cinema, especially because
Yeah.
of the surround
Mm.
sound that you do get from movie musicals.
Yeah, and I think it's also just that there's something about musicals which I think bring people together. I think they're just meant to be watched together. I remember how filled out like West Side Story was when that was on that
That
Saffron
was
screen.
packed.
Yeah.
Just like, and it's just kind of meant to be seen together. I think there's just something about a musical which just kind of begs you to kind of watch with other people, because there are these great ensemble numbers, happening, where there's all these people combined collectively together. it feels a little bit weird just to be sat in front of your TV at home while this is happening, you know. You should be out with other people like they are, you
Yeah.
know, you should be part
Yeah.
of the ensemble audience, you know. I will say there is a discussion to be had. It has a great cast and the performances are great, but obviously the film is very reliant on the singing. And there is a discussion to be had about whether you should cast movie stars to be singers. A lot of people, there's a lot of criticism thrown Russell Crowe's way for his nasally voice, but the two, you know, two of the leads in it, you know, like Anne Hathaway and Hugh Jackman do have big backgrounds in musical theatre, and I think a lot of the actors did surprise people. So it's not quite like, you know, West Side Story where they did go full out on the kind of these people have a musical theatre background. There is a bit, you know, of the movie star here. But I think honestly, the music's strong enough, the direction is strong enough that it's going to carry you through, and their performances are still, you know, really strong. So again, you might not be getting the singing that you would get on the West End, but you get to look at Hugh Jackman for like nearly 3 hours. So you know,
What else did you want?
yeah.
So for fans of the original musical, for fans of the film, or people who just want to see this for the very first time, when can we see this at Saffron Screen?
So it is playing for one night only at Saffron Screen on Tuesday, the 20th at 7 p.m. So I hope to see you there.
It will be a great night with, like, especially when we have these films on once, it's great to have this community of people. There's a lot of discussions that come out of it afterwards. So yeah, looking to be a great night.
Hmm. Well, I've probably talked long enough. I've waxed lyrical long enough about Les Miserables. Emily, would you like to, you know, not take us too far away? It's something theatrical.
Still in the realm, still in the realm. So I'm going to be covering our National Theatre live fix for February in the form of Vanya, which stars Andrew Scott. Now, I haven't seen this one. Obviously, it screens on the 22nd of February. So really all of my information is coming from reviews and the descriptions of the play, really. This is a one-man show starring Andrew Scott, who is an Irish actor. You may know him from Fleabag, All of Us Strangers, which I am yet to see, but I'm very, very much looking forward to. He was in the 2014 film Pride, and some of his accolades include a Golden Globe nomination for All of Us Strangers recently. He earned the Critics' Choice Award for supporting actor in a comedy for Fleabag, and he also won the BAFTA for his supporting role in Sherlock back in the early 2010s. He's really not new to theatre acting in any way. In fact, he's been acting on stage since 1982 when he was just 6 years old.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. Back in Dublin with his theatre company there. And he's had theatre accolades almost every year from 1996 until now. A trusted man on the stage. He's had a few National Theatre credits before, such as Aristocrats in 2005. So Vanya is written and adapted by Simon Stevens from Anton Chekhov's original production, first published in 1897. And Chekhov, it was a Russian playwright, and Simon Stevens has adapted this play into, it's described as a radical new version of Chekhov's Uncle Vanya, which was the original production. Obviously, the original production didn't have one person playing every character. So I think it will be really interesting to see how that translates and how Andrew Scott is able to switch between these characters apparently so seamlessly.
I think it's quite interesting they've made that sort of
Yeah.
change to make it a one-man show because
Yeah.
Simon Stevens, the writer has adapted it. I mean, to give you some of like his kind of credits, like, you know, he's done things like Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime, which that has very innovative sort of structure and way of kind of showing itself on stage, to maybe perhaps what you would imagine from kind of the original text. I think it's quite interesting as we see it kind of reimagined,
Yeah.
especially by an actor who feels very modern in Andrew
Yeah.
Scott.
His I think Stephen's methods are really interesting. Like, yeah, especially from Curious Incident, kind of the way that is structured, and the way that we follow the main character very intensely. It'll be interesting to kind of see how that translates with one person playing multiple characters. So I watched the trailer for Vanya, and in it Andrew Scott's playing characters of various accents, various mannerisms. The set is really, really minimalistic. It's a few chairs, a swing that hangs down, and some steps. And I really am really interested to see how he commands the space, and especially with these various characters that he's playing, how he manages to be completely different. And something interesting I've seen is that there is, at one point, the back curtain comes down to reveal a mirror that reflects the audience back on themselves.
Ooh.
I thought that was really interesting, especially with the things I've seen about this play covering themes of emptiness, hopelessness, and kind
Mm.
of reflection on oneself.
Do you think that will have the same impact as, watching on screen as opposed to being in a theater when obviously it's not going to be reflecting us as the audience, it's going to be reflecting the audience that night?
Yeah, especially with camera work that comes with national theatre performances being screened, we see close-ups that we wouldn't obviously see if we were sat in a theatre. So yeah, that'll be interesting to
Yeah,
see.
maybe through other ways that, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Funnily enough, I'm gonna reference Fleabag here, but but not the TV show, the actual the main
Yeah,
stage
the
show.
show that
Yeah,
is a one-woman show.
exactly. And that
Yeah.
like that the way that that's structured, like it does it. I can't remember if it has an interval or not now. I don't think it
No,
does.
I don't think so.
It's just like 90 solid minutes of it.
Yeah.
And I think it'd be interesting to see if that has an interval and how that kind of separates it up compared to not having an interval with something like Fleabag, because Phoebe Waller-Bridge, like in Fleabag, is just the way that she differentiates from each character and herself and talking to the audience or to talking to whoever she is talking to was just like at first I was like, I'm not gonna be able to follow this. But within like 30 seconds, I was like,
Yeah.
I've completely forgotten that it's
Because
one
she's
person.
not changing her costumes, and I don't think
Yeah.
Andrew Scott does in this production either. She's not changing her costume, she's just changing mannerisms and sometimes accents. And I think it's a real testament to how good
Mm,
you are as an actor if you are able to so easily distinguish those
yeah.
characters, like, by yourself without any like outside input from any
Yeah.
other characters, because it's easy for the audience to become lost in seeing just one person on stage.
Yeah.
So I think we've seen a bit of a trend of it recently as well, because obviously, like you say,
Yeah.
we had the Fleabag, but there's also things like Prima Facie with Jodie
I
Comer
was
and
gonna say that.
yeah. No,
That's
well,
perfect. Yeah.
great minds think alike.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it seems like a bit of a bit of a trend as of late, and I think those one person shows really can hold your attention for that
Mm,
whole time. It kind of makes it that
Yeah.
one thrilling roller coaster ride that I guess in a way is more similar to a film, where it's a bit more focused and grounded in a way. Do you agree? Or
I think so, yeah. I've got a production overview of the original Uncle Vanya. Uncle Vanya has spent his life managing the estate and business affairs of his family with little regard for his efforts. Andrew Scott plays the titular character alongside his second wife Helena, retired Professor Alexander, and his daughter Sonia, Vanya's widowed mother Maureen, his romantic rival, the country doctor Michael, and the nanny Maria, alongside Elizabeth and Liam. So many, many characters. And this play is a drama or a tragic comedy. It's described as in 4 acts, and it's said to be a study of aimlessness and hopelessness, especially a study of Russian country life in the
Mm.
19th century, I think, and a study on the complexities of human emotions, which really will be present, I think, with him playing so many characters himself.
so you mentioned 4 acts there. Do we get an interval in the middle of those 4 acts?
It's interesting, actually. It says here that this play is an hour and 50 minutes with no interval. So I'm interested to see, yeah, if we are following that same 4-act structure, or if in the modernization of this play they've kind of switched around the structure, and we
Mm.
will be seeing just a complete runtime with no breaks. And I'm also interested to see how that will play out with the one-man show, and how that will work with an hour and 50 minutes of straight acting from Andrew Scott.
Well, I think that could make it quite engaging actually, because it's kind of
Yeah,
that pressure
definitely.
cooker, like just seeing him just go relentlessly, relentlessly, relentlessly. It's almost
Oh yeah.
even more impressive. But I also think it's a fair runtime to not have an interval. 1 hour 50. There are plenty of
Yeah.
movies that you would sit through for 1 hour 50. Again, I mean, Les Mis, which I was talking about earlier, is longer than this. So
Mm.
people, I think, will be able to endure this, especially if it is this kind of gripping one-man show that we all hope it's going to be.
I've got a review from The Guardian here of the original West End performance. They say it's a tall order to turn this play into a one-man production, but Andrew Scott is the complete correct fit. He holds us captive, although the play itself is overshadowed by its high concept. Andrew Scott gives carefully controlled, thrilling physical performances. He exits as one character and enters as another, excelling in the plate juggling feat of playing 2 or more characters in conversation. Where the romances in this play might so easily have felt off kilter, they reel us in. He gives each character symbolic tics and changes of voice. For example, Helena is a posh woman who twiddles her necklace. The titular Vanya is a rakish type. Entertaining with lots of sharp comedy and one-liners, but by the nature of the dramatic experiment, Andrew Scott cannot be allowed to penetrate a character deeply enough for the tragedy to be truly felt by the end. So I feel like there's a lot to be said about, yeah, this experimental way of changing this play, and how there is a possibility it could limit Andrew Scott's acting and his ability to become fully immersed in these characters that he is playing, because of the sheer volume of
Mm.
the characters he's trying to play.
Guess it's almost like, in a way, it's less about the story and kind of empathizing with those characters and more about the impressiveness of what Andrew Scott
Exactly.
is doing.
Yeah.
Which I feel could either hinder or help this performance in impressiveness, really.
Mm.
Hmm. Every time you talk about, both of you, films or whatever, I come away from this and I'm like, I want to see both of them now.
If this one-man show has piqued your interest, it'll be showing Thursday, the 22nd of February at Saffron Screen, and it's a 12A. And as previously mentioned, it's an hour and 50 minutes with no interval. I think it starts at 7 o'clock, I
Yeah,
think.
7 o'clock.
And it seems to be peak season for musicals. We've got some upcoming theatre screen performances. We have Kinky Boots the musical on the 4th of February, The Motive and the Cue, which I think is not a musical but still a theatre performance, on the 28th of March, An American in Paris the musical on the 21st of April, and 42nd Street the musical on the 26th of May. So be sure to get your tickets booked for those. Up next, we've got Riley to talk about a new release that I am really looking forward to, The Color Purple. Take it away.
Oh yeah. First of all, I have two questions for both of you. The first question, have you seen the original The Color Purple, the film?
I have not.
I haven't either.
Okay, that's fine. I'm not judging. I'm just curious.
Mhm.
Have either of you, which I'm assuming is the answer is no, have either of you read the book?
The book is sitting on my bookshelf unread. I
Ooh.
need to read it, but I have not yet.
That's fair. It will be interesting, depending on if you watch the film first or the book first. It'll be interesting to see what you think of them. So I watched the film first with Whoopi Goldberg, and then I read the book about a year ago, possibly year and a half, before I even knew there was a film and a musical about it. So I had the general idea of the story. So it's set to come out on the 26th of January, and it was interesting. I liked it. I loved it, but also I liked it. I don't know if that makes sense, but I'm still kind of
Yeah,
I'm thinking about it.
Mm.
Which I guess is good because
a good sign, yeah.
yeah, makes you think about it.
obviously we've kind of talked about how it's been a book, then there was an original movie, and now it's a musical movie. Like, what is kind of, I guess for people who don't know, what is kind of the concept or what's the plot of
Yes.
the film?
So to set the scene, it's based about two sisters in southern states. Celia and Nettie, they're really good. They're so close sisters. Nettie is the older sister, I believe. She goes to school. She's given a lot more opportunity because she's seen as more intelligent, but obviously that's just because she is allowed to go to school. Celia has become pregnant with, I think, twice, maybe even more times with their so-called dad. It's basically Celia's life. They move on, they marry. Nettie, the sister, they get separated. So Nettie ends up in South Africa and they don't know whether or not each other is alive. And they start writing letters, but then one of them isn't getting letters, so they still don't know. It's basically a series of unfortunate events, and it's about how at the end of this all, Celie is still thankful that she's alive. She's got the memories of her sister, and it is the journey of her life. And it touches on people in her life, and how it impacts her and how she impacts them. It's a lot. And I was worried I'm always worried with films like this, how they're going to cram it all in, because the book covers a lot more than the film. And yeah, it's interesting to think about it. It's starring Danielle Brooks, who I will come on to later, Taraji P. Henson, who I know from Hidden Figures. So as soon as I saw that she was in it, I was like, I know what I'm in for. So she's playing the character of Shug, who is this popular blues singer that has basically broken out of the community and has become basically rich and famous. Everyone loves her. She lives in the city. It's a very complicated story to explain, but it will make sense when you watch it or read it. It's also got Fantasia Barrino, which I will never forget her name because of the impact that she had during the film. I hadn't heard of her before this. When I came out of the film, I Googled her. It's just what happens. And basically, she started out as a singer. She wasn't starting out as an actor. She was actually on American Idol, which she later went on to win, which says something in itself. When I went down the whole rabbit hole a bit more, it turns out that she actually played Celie on Broadway in
Oh wow.
2007.
Mm.
Yeah, so I was like,
Oh,
this
okay.
like makes it even better
Yeah.
in terms of how I feel about it, because it seems like it's a very close character to her. My word, she has some pipes. Like, she was incredible, and I'm a sucker for someone who can sing and
Mm.
someone who can sing live.
Mm.
And I have yet to look into whether or not it was recorded live on set. I think possibly parts were, like you were saying with Les Mis, you could kind of tell in some moments which were more like dubbed and then some was more live.
Mm. I was wondering on that note, obviously she's very impressive, but I was wondering, obviously, as we kind of talked about with Les Mis, there's this mix of movie stars, some can sing quite well, some have just learned for this
Mm.
film. How does that mix play out in this film? And do you feel like the other singers in this film are able to hold their own?
I don't know much about this film. I know that you've got Halle Bailey, who was recently in The Little Mermaid, and
Yeah.
my God, can she sing?
Yeah.
She does she sing in this?
She does. She's not as big of a role as I thought she was, because
Yeah,
she is the sister, but she's only the young version of her sister.
right.
So, but again, like, I think with this, it's evident that they've chosen people that have been in Broadway or on
Mm,
stage singing instead of acting. There's basically a singer called Her in it, and she is a singer. And I
yeah.
don't know, I haven't looked into her that much, no pun intended. Um, I haven't looked at her roles that much because I got just carried away with Fantasia. But it does seem that they've not necessarily thought about it more, but they have cast it in terms of who would be great singing in this role. It just kind of happens that they are amazing at acting it as well. And again, with Fantasia being in it already in the musical, and Taraji like playing Shug, she's a blues singer, like she's famous for singing.
Mm.
And in a way, like she was up there with Fantasia in the way that she was singing. It was like butter melting listening to some of the singing. It pleased my inner musical child hearing it. I didn't know what to expect because I loved the book so much. it made me excited to read again because I kind of lost that excitement. So I finished the book and I was like, I don't know how they're going to turn this into a musical. And obviously it's been a musical on stage, but I had no knowledge about this before I saw the film the other day. I had a feeling from the trailers that I wouldn't like it. I wasn't blown away by it. I was blown away by bits of it. I still think it's amazing, but I wasn't blown away. But I think that's because I'm looking at it as a point of view of I've seen the original, I've seen the book. If I was a 16, 17-year-old watching it, studying film or studying musical theatre or just going to see it, I think that I would love it
Mm,
because I'm that of that generation. And in one of the trailers, it says it's a classic retelling for a new generation. I think that sums it up really well.
right. Do you think it's still open to people who are of a previous generation, though, or maybe people who even say, the original one, that's one of my favorite
Yeah,
films, or it's, and they are of that kind of older and that older way of telling that story. Do you think there's
yeah.
still stuff for them in this?
Oh yeah, definitely. I know it does sound like I'm playing it down, but I do think it's worth seeing, even if you do love the book and you really do love the original, because it does bring something new to it. And I think for me, I was worried about how they were going to tell the story, but I was actually really surprised by the singing side of it, and I really loved that part of it. And it feels like, and I don't mean this in a bad way, it feels like a modern musical set in the 1900s. It reminded me in some of the the choreography and the actual songs, it reminded me of In the Heights and kind of that very, yeah, the very modern feeling to it. There wasn't great big numbers. There were some big numbers, but some of them were just simply Celie in further down the line, when she's a little bit older. She has her own shop and she sells and sews her own trousers for women. And it's just her in the shop. And it's like 90 seconds of her singing. And that song was the one that kind of gave me goosebumps. And I was like, wow. And I like nearly cried. And I didn't even know why. It was just the way that it was done and the way that she was singing it. And I keep going on about Fantasia, but the rest of the cast, every single
Mm,
person convinced me. Like Taranji playing Shug was perfect. She had this like red, it must have been something like silk dress on with like this feather headdress, and it just that sums her up, just the feather headdress alone. She had an edge to her like she did in the book, but she was also very soft and gentle, and she was on Celie's side. That was just it was just done so well because you don't want that character to come off too sharp and then to not the audience to not fall in love with them when it's such a big role in this story. Danielle Brooks, who I recently just found out is also in Orange is the New Black. She played the outspoken, headstrong character of Sophia, who essentially gets into trouble for sticking up for herself. She did an amazing job. She was really like she was the character that I snort laughed like at some of her lines. Like she was amazing and like she was telling people and putting people in her place like she should have been done. And obviously she's just been nominated for actress in a supporting role. Overall, I think it was a really good film. I'm really glad I saw it for the purpose of being for a new generation and introducing the story to the new generation. I think it's done really well.
mm.
And I think musical side of it, I love. And from this, I want to see on stage because I want to hear the songs live and I want to hear I'm Here live because that song was amazing.
I mean, broadly speaking, it has been quite well received, hasn't it? Like so far
Yeah.
by the critics and by
Yeah.
audiences seemingly, and it did very well, especially in the United States, and probably
Mm,
that I think that's just success is going to continue in the UK. So it does seem, despite
yeah.
like you say, it deals with a lot of hard, stuff, and maybe it's not, an orthodox sort of story. I think as
Yeah.
well, it's still a crowd pleaser, I think.
Yes, definitely. And it made me fall even more in love with like musical theatre if I wasn't in love with it enough already. That is really the shining point of this film was the musical theatre side of it and the singing. So yeah, it's definitely worth seeing. So the first screening of The Color Purple is Friday the 9th of February. It's on again the Saturday the 10th, 7:30, Sunday the 11th at 2:30, and then Monday the 12th at 7:30. The Monday is actually a subtitle screening, which I'm really glad that we have. I want everyone to know, like to go and look up Fantasia, I'm Here, and watch a Broadway like video of her singing because she is amazing. with the Oscar nominations being announced at the end of January, which is really interesting to read through, it's looking as though February will be full of nominated titles. So, Poor Things has a hefty 11 nominations, including Best Picture. And that's screening from February the 2nd. So that has Emma Stone in, it's got Mark Ruffalo in, it's got Willem Dafoe in. It is an absolutely bonkers film in the best way possible. Yeah, that's all I'm going to say on that. Napoleon has also been nominated for 2 categories, including Best Visual Effects, and will be screening it again due to popular demand on February the 17th.
And along with our reshowing of Napoleon, we also have the heavy sellout of One Life coming back for 2 screenings. Now, One Life has been an incredible sellout. I've had people come out and tell me it was one of the best films they've ever seen in their life. Wonka is also back early February and is already selling out quickly, so be sure to get your tickets.
As well as Wonka, for younger audiences, we hope that you might also enjoy Migration, which is the new animated film from Illumination, the creators of the Despicable Me and the Minions films. Other than Migration, we also have Mean Girls. This isn't the original classic that you know and love, but it's a new musical adaptation of that film based on the Broadway version. So we've got a lot of musicals coming out as well, and we have 2 showings of that.
So thank you all for listening to our 2nd episode of Frame by Frame, the Saffron Screen podcast. Any feedback or comments you have are greatly appreciated. We'd love it if you could talk to any members of staff on shift, if you come to the cinema to watch these films. Just anything you have to say about this podcast is greatly received. We hope you'll join us both at the cinema and next month for our 3rd episode. Thank you. See you next time.
Toodles!
Bye!
See ya.